Well, I appreciate you having me, and I think I told you before, and I really mean it's a blessing. Like guys like yourself are able to give, not only give back, but give young guys some hope and some positive feedback, and basically tell them how it really is. I think there's a lot of distorted information out there, and guys really don't understand. You know, they see the LeBrons and they see the Michael Jordans and the guys that have made it, but they don't see what it took to get those guys there. So it's important for you and guys like myself to make them understand that it's a process, and it's an everyday process, that you can't get to the prize unless you understand what it's going to take to get to that particular prize.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, Coach Cyprian, this is your first time being on our Heavy Brand podcast. Just want you to give a little bio to our young listeners and viewers.
Well, I've been very blessed and very fortunate. I coached college basketball for 27 years at numerous universities. My last stunt in college was at Texas Tech in 2019, where we lost to Virginia in the national championship game, which was a heck of a game. We wound up losing in overtime. But like anything else, just to get to that game was a heck of a run for us and for our team, for the university. Prior to that, I was at Oklahoma State in 2004, where we also had an opportunity to go to Final Four. So in my collegiate career, you know, which is hard to do as an assistant coach, to be part of two programs where you're able to get to the Final Four, I was blessed to be able to do so. So in 27 years of coaching. Then after that, I was able to coach I was in the NBA for 4 years with the Memphis Grizzlies, and I had dual roles. I was in the front office in the player personnel department. I was also over the G League team. I took over in Iowa Mid-City, and I also led the Memphis Hustle for an entire year, where in our inaugural year we had a really good year. So my background is kind of well-versed. Last summer, I coached over in the World Cup with the Nigerian national team.
Beautiful.
Where we had a pretty good run and qualified for the Olympics, the 2020 Olympics. So we put together a pretty good team there, and what a great experience it was. I resigned from Texas Tech and was looking to do something different, some overseas, and that's what I did in Nigeria last summer. And again, we had a good run in Japan. In China, where we had a pretty good run and qualified for the Olympics. So with that being said, I think you're talking to someone that's been on every level that understand. I was once an AAU coach, so I get that. And you know, I've recruited all around the country, for sure in the Michigan area, where I know it's a hotbed of talent.
Yes, sir.
So I've been able to just kind of get around a little bit in my career.
Thank you, Coach. Now, for our young ball players in the Detroit area in high school, you know, I especially wanted to have you on because for my generation in the 90s, there's guys that were considered, you know, first team, second team All-State that years later weren't doing too well because they put all their eggs in the NBA basket and didn't have a plan B. What would you suggest to our young ball players of today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. You know, I think sometimes guys let the ball use them and they don't use the ball, so to speak. And that's a phrase that I've carried with me for a long time. And basically what that means is, you know, you play ball and you continue to play, and before you know it, you know, the ball stopped bouncing, you know, whether it's because of an injury or you then making the NBA team or whatever the case may be, versus using the ball in terms of getting your degree. If you're blessed enough to play a little bit overseas or get a professional contract, but at least you've got that degree to fall back on no matter what happens. And it's unfortunate. It happens a lot today. Is a lot of guys are selling these young kids, you know, the big piece of pie, and they don't understand that there's so much more into using that ball to get to where they want to go. I look at and talk to a lot of companies and different parts of the country these days, and they want to hire ex-basketball players. And the reason is because, during the course of a career, during the course of a game, you've got basketball players that are put in pressure situations where they've got to make decisions on their feet, on the run. And in some businesses, that's kind of what companies are looking for. They want guys that can handle high stressful situations like athletes handle on the second base, on the minute, on the run. So companies looking for guys all the time. So I say that to say, if you can go to a college and use it to play and have a pretty good career, if you can come out there with a degree, it's been a success.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, Coach, having coached in the big leagues, even some of these major conferences like the Big 12 with the Red Raiders, Texas Tech, or the SEC with Razorbacks, like big conferences like that. What are you looking for when you're recruiting high school talent for the college level?
Well, the one thing I'm going to say is, and I did another podcast a week ago, I think one thing young kids take for granted is, and especially even when I was in the NBA as a scout and as a college scout looking around, I have what I look for is I like to get to games early, first of all. I like to see guys in the warm-up. I like to see guys when they warm it up in the layup line. Are they taking things serious? Are they communicating with the players? Are they looking in the stands for their girlfriends? I'm a big believer in game prep. How are you mentally getting yourself ready for a game? So I think that's the one thing, getting the games early and guys taking it serious. The other thing I look at is if you're there to see a player, whether it's because he's potentially a college player or potentially an NBA player, obviously, the talent's there. I'm looking for the intangibles. The intangible to me would be, okay, fine. He gets substituted out of the game. How does he communicate with the head coach? Is he mad because he took him out? Does he communicate with his players when he walk off the floor? When they give him a towel, does he throw the towel down? Mm-hmm. Is he cheering for his teammates who's doing well? Is he clapping? Is he a guy where you want on a bench? And those are, I think, the little things are important, because what most guys don't understand, whether they go and they're young, whether they go to a high school team, varsity team, or to a college team or to an NBA team, in most cases, they may not be the superstar right off the bat. So they've got to come in and fulfill a role. Your role might be 6, 7, 8 guy going into a program, going into an NBA team. So how can you handle that? The other thing I look at, and I talk to all the time, is that, a guy misses 3 or 4 shots during the course of a game and he's a great scorer. Does it affect how he plays on the other end? Does that affect the way he defends on the other end? I think that's important. So those are things I look at right off the bat. I look at, again, guy comes out for second half of the game, doing warm-ups. Is he communicating? Maybe coach got in his butt. How is he reacting doing, coming out of warm-ups? How does he play the second half? Is there any type of attitude? Again, because if it's the NBA, you're investing a lot of money on the kid's future. If you're in college, you're investing a lot of money on the kid. So those are things that are important. You don't want a kid that's got a little bit poison, maybe a little bit selfish in your locker room at any time. And lastly, for me, it's always been game over. You may or may not have played well. Do you shake hands? Again, are you happy for your teammates? The game's over. Coach has gotten your butt. You walk out of the locker room. There may be some kid that wants your autograph. How are you going to react to situations like that? And again, that's for me the total picture of not just a basketball player, but everything that makes you who you are as a player. Again, having the opportunity. How do you handle success? How do you handle yourself when you're not handle success? And I think all those things are important. And those are the things for all these years that I always looked at. Not always the most talented guys, but who's going to fit in from a chemistry standpoint of what we're trying to do. Who's going to be the glue guy? I'll tell you one quick story. One of the guys I had and I recruited who had a great career is Tony Allen. Tony Allen.
Oklahoma State.
Yep. So I recruited Tony to Oklahoma State. Tony, people don't understand this, led us to the Final Four. He was a great scorer in college, had a really good career. Well, he goes on and gets drafted to the Boston Celtics, and now he's not playing. So one day we have a conversation, Doc River tells him the same thing. You have to reinvent yourself. All right. We've got guys that can score. We've got Kevin Durant. We've got Pierce. We've got guys that can score. How are you going to get yourself on the floor? You got to learn how to defend. Okay. So boom, Tony changed his game for the sake of getting on the floor, earning a spot. And then 14 years later, you look at a guy who had a great career, and everyone looks at it now and say, oh, boy, he's the grind father. He was a great defender.
All
but what
defense.
people don't understand was when I recruited Tony, Tony was Big 12 of the year. He was a great offensive player. So I'm saying that to say is, you have to reinvent yourself sometimes depending on where you get drafted, what college you go to. You got to figure it out how to get on the floor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, Coach, for some of our viewers, wanted to ask you now, Tony Allen being from the Chicago area, of the big cities, give me a top 5 as far as the talent pool when you're recruiting.
Top 5 meaning the cities where I've recruited in all these years?
Yes, sir. That really sticks out in your memory as far as like,
hey, I tell you, that's a great question, and I get what guys all the time. There's a stereotype, and you can hold me to this if you want, but there's a stereotype by different parts of the country, and this is what I'm gonna say, and I really believe this. I think Detroit, I think Chicago have always been areas where there've been talented players, and you've been able to get tough guys. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, you can get tough guys out of those two states where guys are tough. They know how to play. No one's giving them anything. And if I wanted a tough guy, that's where I would go. And I've had a lot of success in Chicago. I got Sean Marion, who's from Waukegan on the outskirts. Mm-hmm. But I've had Sean Marion, Keon Clark, Tyrone Nesby. I can go down the list. DeAndre Liggins. I've always gone in Chicago to get tough guys, and I think Detroit's the same way. So I think those two states are up there, no question. Now I think there's been a drop off in talent. Don't get me wrong, but I also think the perception and the stereotype is going to those states, and you can find good, tough basketball players. Mm-hmm. I think if you need a shooter, you go somewhere like Indiana. You go somewhere where guys are skilled. They understand how to play, and you can go get you a good shooter from a place like Indiana. If you want, a finesse guy, maybe an athletic finesse guy that's versatile, that can do some things. Again, I'm talking all stereotypes and perception. Right. And there's always, an exception to the rule. You go West Coast. I think the West Coast turns out a lot of skilled guys. A lot of guys are finesse players on the West Coast. Maybe not as gritty as most guys in the Midwest. Maybe not as
very athletic.
Down south, but they're athletic, and they're guys that's really skilled that knows how to play. And then you can make your way. Again, another state that I probably mentioned or did mention or city is Memphis. The state of Tennessee. I think Memphis is again like Chicago, like Detroit. You have tough guys that knows how to play, that has a chip on their shoulder. So those 3 cities in my mind, or those 3 states in my mind, are a lot similar. And if you want to move east, if you want to go east, obviously New York is New York. I don't think the talent is where it's been over the years. Not by far. But in my mind, you can get you a blue chip out of there. You can get you a guy that's not rated because the state is so big. You can get you one out of there. And then lastly, I think what's really happened in living in Texas, there've been an onslaught of families moving to Texas, whether it's because of military reasons or whatever. But man, in the state of Texas, obviously so big, but they've been a really good selection of players that are in the state of Texas. And me being from New Orleans, after Katrina, there was a lot of kids that left New Orleans that moved to the state of Texas because of Katrina. Prime example, Kelly Oubre. He was one. DJ Augustine was one. And I can go on and on. The kids that because of Katrina, they were forced to move to the state of Texas. So again, I just gave you a list of kind of stereotype perception, but I think over my years of 31 years, man, it's pretty true. But I've always loved Detroit. I've always loved coming through that Saginaw, I had a kid when I was at Lamar University in 1989, I think it was, summer of 1990, by the name of Darrell Reed. And Darrell was from Saginaw. But I just think, I think Detroit is a hotbed. And I think that it gives a little bit of a bad reputation. Everybody see the Fab Five and think it's dropped off. But I think you can go get a kid who can really overachieve in the state of Michigan, in my opinion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, thinking of New Orleans in recruiting, I was thinking of a guard at Oklahoma, I believe, named Holly. I think he was from New Orleans.
Hollis Price.
Hollis
Yeah.
Price.
Yeah, Hollis Price. Yeah. Hollis Price was a good one. In New Orleans, we've had a lot of guys come out of here. We've had, I can go on some names you might not know, but Robert Pack, Randy Livingston, Georgetown back in the day had Perry McDonald, Dwayne Bryant. At once upon a time, it was a hotbed of really good talent out of the state of Louisiana. It's, again, dropped off a little bit. But like anything else, I think everything is cyclical. There's a lot of young kids that's coming through that's going to be really good.
Now, Coach, we always want to expand the young listeners' horizons and do a flip side. So for those that's not going to play ball but want to get into coaching one day, I've coached only on the high school level. And I remember the stress of looking at feeder schools, which would be the middle schools, where those that will be finishing 8th grade will be coming to the high school that I was coaching at. And I remember the stress of having to compete with the other schools in that district. Now, how is a typical day in the life of a college coach?
Well, I'll tell you this, the run we had at Texas Tech was great. I worked for one of the best college coaches in the country by far. I think Coach Beard does an unbelievable job, but he was by far one of the hardest workers I've ever been around in my career. And I was very fortunate. I mean, I coached at Kentucky, UNLV, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Eddie Sutton, who's a Hall of Famer. So I've been around a lot of coaches. I say that to say our typical office time at Texas Tech, which was my last job, so I'll just kind of tell you it. Usually you're in the office about 8:15. I would have a group at about 8:45 of bigs where you did individual work. They'd get their work in. Then I'd have another group in. So you'd go back to the office. You'd have film with the guys. You'd break for lunch. You'd have an hour off. And you would have a staff meeting every day before practice. Staff meeting usually took place about 1:15, depending on if coach had any interviews or anything to do. We were on the floor usually at about 3 o'clock. Prior to that, guys always put shots up. So as an assistant coach, you're on the floor at about 2:15 getting shots up before practice started. Every day we did film. We had film work every day. If it was your scout, you were responsible for film work. So prior to the 3 o'clock practice, as a team, we would be in the film room at about 2:30, either going over yesterday's practice or going over or getting ready for game prep for the team that you're going to play next. So practice would go at about 3. We probably get done about 5, 5:15, 5:30, depending on the time of the year. You would break as an assistant coach. You would have an opportunity to go home. And then most of us would get back to the office about 7, 7:30. And on the average, you're not going to believe this, but we stayed at the office at 2 a.m. every night, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And there's no other way to say it. If you know anybody that worked for Coach Beard, they'll tell you the same thing. The good thing about Coach Beard was that he was in the office with us as well. Okay. So it wasn't a situation where the assistants was working and the head coach wasn't working. He was there with us every night. Once we got into the NCAA tournament, we went on a run. When we would travel to the different sites where we played, we would stay in the ballroom with, watching film and everything, usually 4:35 in the morning. We'd call it quits, come down for breakfast 8:30 and 9 with the team. And then it was the same thing every night going through the weekend. So with that being said, I think everybody see the glitz and glamour to it. And there is, coaches are paid a lot of money. Obviously, there's a lot of stress to it. Yes. Everybody turns on the TV and they see, oh, man, don't they look good? sitting on that bench with those nice suits. But what people don't understand, especially as an assistant coach, what it takes not only to, recruit, but you still have to coach. And one of the things Coach Beard and every guy I work for, I always say this is kind of one of my deals. Guys say, well, I coach at such and such. And I always say, they say, hey, well, he's a head coach. I say, well, I work with. How guys say I work for. I'd rather say I work with. And to me, that always made a difference because I always felt like if I'm working with a guy versus for a guy, I think it makes all the difference in the world. I think the other thing was I always try to work for coaches that empowered me because I think there's a impression about, or stereotype. If you're a black assistant coach, is all you can do is recruit. I always like to work for guys where they would say, hey, this guy can coach. He's going to be a head coach one day. Not only can he recruit, but he's also a good coach. And so I would try to work with guys that would empower me in front of players because of the stereotype. So, it's a grind as an assistant coach. I think the other things that there's a lot of things as assistant coach you do behind the scene that the head coach never know. You have players that's going through personal issues sometimes, whether it be death in the family or a breakup.
Mental health.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that they go through that no one knows about, that you as an assistant coach, you just deal with, you handle, and you keep it moving. The story I like to tell is, you have a player who's had a great week of practice, and then on game day, for whatever reason, he's not playing well, and the fans boo. Or everybody's wondering, like, oh, my God, what's wrong with this guy? Well, what they didn't realize is maybe this kid had a death in the family. In some cases, I've had some guys got a girl pregnant. Or in some cases, I've had some guys where, the mom and dad, there was some type of dispute going on that you try to handle, and you try to tell guys, hey, for 2 hours, I need to get the best out of you if you can, and then we'll learn to deal with that situation when it's over. So those are all the things that assistant coaches deal with that people don't see. Again, they see the glitz and the glamour of, oh, man, that guy, he's at Michigan or he's at Michigan State, and they don't understand what a job entails. And it could go anywhere from an 8-hour job to a 24-hour job. It just depends on who you're working for.
Now, Coach, I have 2 final questions for you, not to put you on the spot.
Sure.
What is the most difficult skill to teach in basketball?
I think, the game has changed. I talked to Tony Allen again because we're very close. And I think what has happened is the game has changed now because everybody's all offense. And that's all everybody's teaching is offense. And I think, again, everything in life is cyclical where it's going to come back to say defense. And people don't want to teach defense because it's demanding. They don't want to teach defense because you have to be disciplined. People don't want to teach defense because you have to lean on players to be better, to do better. I think one of the things nowadays is to teach guys how to guard. If you asked me this question 10 years ago, I might say ball handling skills. I might say shooting. I might say screen and roll. But I think personally, one of the hardest things now is to get a guy to teach him how to guard and to explain to him why it's so important. Because right now it's about how many points you can score versus, trying to guard and stop a guy.
Pretty much. And final question, put you on the hot seat again. Who is the most athletic player that you've ever coached?
Most athletic was probably Sean Marion. I mean, it's between Sean Marion and I had a kid named Keon Clark.
Long lefty. Okay.
Long left. Oh, you're good. I had those 2 guys at UNLV back in the day. And, Sean Marion could jump twice before most guys jump once. Facts. And Keon was so long and he could run. And he was an unbelievable athlete. I think those 2 guys are probably the most athletic guys I've coached. And I think the thing that I enjoy, I've been fortunate to coach a lot of guys who weren't really rated, top-rated guys. I mean, I had Patrick Beverly at Arkansas. Patrick Beverly was just a grinder. He reminds me, again, a lot of Tony Allen. Keon, Sean Marion, those guys weren't really rated guys. They made themselves great players. So I think that's the one thing I've been proud of is, not just to go after the top 5 guys.
The McDonald's All-Americans.
Exactly. To go after the guys. And what you can do, if you can find the right guy, you can motivate him. And you can say, hey, okay, so you weren't rated top 50. Okay, what are you going to do? It ain't about what you do prior to getting to college, prior to going to the NBA. It's how you finish. And if you can get a guy that's a little motivated, boy, you can get the most out of him every time. And I really believe that.
Coach, you've given us a wealth of experience, a day in the life. You've opened up the youth's eyes to not just playing the game, but also coaching the game. I'm speechless, and this is podcast, but I'm speechless. I'm very grateful for how humble you are, despite, a man of your qualifications and just, coming on a small youth podcast in Detroit. I want to thank you for coming on Heavy Brand Podcast, Coach Cyprian.
I'd love to come back anytime, and I really mean this. I think, boy, Detroit and the Michigan area is a great area. I've always followed basketball there. Obviously, there have been a lot of players that come out of there. But, again, it's kind of got a bad rep. And I think everybody always talk about the Fab Five, rightly so. But, boy, I look at, what Michigan State have done. And, he's just coaches. He's a grinder, man. And Michigan obviously has always been. But they've been some really good mid-major programs in that area and a lot of really good talent. And I think if you can get the right one out of that area, boy, you can really get something, a pot of gold. But thanks for having me, and I look forward to coming back anytime.
Thank you, Coach. I'm going to upload our episodes on our Instagram page for the podcast. It's Heavy Brand Inc. And hopefully you get a chance or get some time to watch the video again. Thanks a lot, Coach.
All right. Thanks for having me. Good luck.
Sir.
Okay. Bye-bye.